There aren't many games out there more beloved than Elden Ring, and for good reason. It's one of the most expansive and awe-inspiring games ever made, it has immaculate gameplay and a huge variety of playstyles, and an art design that is truly breathtaking. So much so that when I first beat the game, I was taken aback by just how much I enjoyed it because of so many memorable boss fights, cool hidden areas and secrets, and a world that you can truly get lost in. There's a reason Elden Ring is so beloved and one of the highest rated games of all time. And because I personally had never played a FromSoft game before Elden Ring, the formula was entirely new to me, which made it even more exciting. But the thing is, over time, my opinion of Elden Ring has only continued to sour, where now I still see it as one of the best games ever made, but on my own personal list, it might not even be in the top 10. And while I know this isn't a popular discussion to have, I still want to be honest and explain why. Even though Elden Ring fans are by far the most rabid out there I've seen and will attack anyone who doesn't love this game, hopefully I can provide some clear reasons as to why. You see, since I first completed Elden Ring, I have not only gone back and played some other FromSoft titles, but I have also gone back and tried to play Elden Ring again as well, especially for the DLC. And I've slowly come to the realization that I actually have a lot of issues with the game too. First of all, because of Elden Ring's massive scale and scope, a lot of things are copy-pasted. There's so many times, for example, where you will fight the exact same boss spread across multiple dungeons, each with similar movesets and styles, and while these things are all completely optional, especially on second or third playthroughs, you start to see how in some spots, quantity took precedence over quality. Sure, each zone in Elden Ring is awe-inspiring in scale, but once you start to dig into every corner and hidden passageway, so many reused assets and enemies become apparent, and the facade starts to break down. In contrast, if you play something like Dark Souls, Sekiro, or Bloodborne, because of their more linear nature, everything feels deliberate and meaningful. You know that no matter where you go, the things you find will be fully thought out and deserving of your undivided attention. And on top of this, because of the open world nature of Elden Ring, you lose some of the better pacing of previous FromSoft titles, which can potentially result in hours wasted going through pointless side dungeons that aren't actually the best content possible. To be fair though too, these dungeons are still fun and provide unique rewards, and as I mentioned before, because Elden Ring has such a grand scale, it really does make the adventure feel more expansive and memorable in a way. But speaking of memorable, another thing I've grown to actually dislike is how Elden Ring handles lore. When I originally played the game, because it was my first time playing a FromSoft title, I hadn't seen any stories told in quite the same way. It was so cool how I understood almost nothing, and how you had to read item descriptions and murals on the wall to try and piece together the insane lore of the past. After all, most of my favorite worlds in gaming are home to largely mysterious places with tons of unanswered questions. And in essence, Elden Ring itself is just one big mashup of all of those things I like. But in retrospect, once again, after playing more and watching tons of YouTube videos on the lore of the game, I've actually begun to not like it at all. Weird and strange or unexplainable lore is cool, but when your game's story and past is told in such purposely esoteric and hard to understand ways, it comes off as almost pretentious rather than cool. Or in other words, having some mystery is fun, but that mystery needs to be grounded in something that feels real and tangible. In Elden Ring's case, literally everything about the lore, the characters, and the world is just so overbearing and cumbersome to even try to understand. I would watch literal 1 hour long videos explaining the most mundane things about the lore in Elden Ring, and sure, by the end of it, it made a little more sense, but then you would watch again and realize how many assumptions are just being made, how much bullshit is being intertwined with facts, and more than anything, the feeling that Elden Ring is just trying to be hard to understand just for the sake of it. I appreciated this fact at first because I assumed it was all growing towards something that would make full sense and be more interesting. But after diving down the lore rabbit hole for over a year after the game's initial release, I finally have just come to the conclusion that the lore for this game on the most part sucks, at least for me. And by the way, that's coming from someone who has done over 50 hours of YouTube video content on game lore for tons of different series. Trust me, even once you understand the lore behind Elden Ring just a little bit, it's just kind of boring and weird for no other reason than the writers and designers to pat themselves on the back for how cool their game is, in my opinion. So much so that it often feels like the FromSoft writers just sat in a room and laughed, coming up with crazy ideas, and then tried to figure out how to make them be obscure as possible, which in turn would cause the community to hallucinate tons of random things that only might be true. The lore is so confusing, really anyone can make up any story or explanation for anything and find a way to make it make sense. And when your world building becomes this obscure, in my opinion, you're doing something wrong. I loved it at first, but now I've lessened in that appreciation greatly. And overall, lessening in my appreciation is essentially the story of my journey with Elden Ring. Even in the DLC itself, the zone seems so expansive for no reason at times, with countless dead ends, and in the base game, the final third act feels so rushed, with bosses that are as easy as they come and less attention to detail. I distinctly remember even on my first playthrough getting to the wintry mountaintops and just letting out a sigh knowing I had so much of a game left that I thought was almost over. The thing is though, even despite all that, Elden Ring is truly still one of the greatest games ever made, and without a doubt a triumph in the gaming industry. It's just that in retrospect, when I think back on my own personal time with this title, while I did enjoy it, not only do I not want to ever go back to this world, but I've started to notice more and more of the issues in it. And maybe for some people, they either love these so-called issues and look past them or actually find them as a net positive. But for me, I think in the future, I will look back at Elden Ring as a great game I played and enjoyed, and something I'm proud of beating, but not an experience I really want to undergo ever again by any measure. For someone that has made multiple Fallout videos, with many of them being my most popular ever, you would think that I've always been a huge fan of the series, but almost ironically, that couldn't be any further from the truth. When I was growing up, my first Bethesda game ever was Oblivion, and from the moment I set my eyes on Cyrodiil, I was utterly hooked to the Elder Scrolls. I loved the exploration, the music, and the almost whimsical nature you would feel traveling through the wilderness and stumbling upon a new monster hidden in the tree line. It instantly solidified an early love for Bethesda for me, and that love carried over to Skyrim and even bouts with Morrowind. In fact, this love is what eventually convinced me to give other Bethesda IPs a shot as well, primarily Fallout. And yet, when I finally got around to trying Fallout for the first time, I hated it. I remember booting up Fallout 3 specifically as a kid and finding the introduction cumbersome and boring. I didn't care about the characters or world, and I was skipping every dialogue prompt and furiously running around trying to get out of the vault to see what was outside. And when I finally did, I wasn't met with a beautiful vista and serene, cozy feeling like in the Elder Scrolls, but rather I was greeted by a completely barren, desolate, and gray wasteland. As I traversed my way around, everywhere I looked was nothing but rocks and rubble. And in the very first town I walked into, I found an abandoned school full of sadistic raiders who were cutting people's heads off and attacking me. This wasn't at all like the Elder Scrolls, at least in theming, and the relentlessly depressing and worrisome atmosphere in Fallout really turned me off at first. Even when I eventually got around to playing Fallout 4, which had a much less sinister tone, I too found it to have subpar writing and questing, and I quickly gave up on it. And maybe most damning for those of you watching, the absolutely beloved RPG that is Fallout New Vegas was by far my worst first impression of the bunch, as I went in being told it was the best, but found the introduction so tedious I could barely stay awake. And for years after giving all three of these games a shot a couple of times here and there, I just came to the conclusion that Fallout wasn't for me. I was an Elder Scrolls fan through and through, and a post-apocalyptic version of the same formula took away everything that I liked. Well, that's what I thought, until I started making YouTube videos. Because you see, some of the original content I made that helped this channel grow were icebergs, and despite knowing that I wasn't a big fan of Fallout, I also knew how much of a fan base it had. And I guessed correctly that an iceberg going over crazy mysteries would do really well. But what was maybe most surprising in that entire ordeal was just how deep into the lore I got. I knew Fallout had vaults and lots of strange things, but I didn't realize just how interesting they were. As I learned more and more about Fallout and its history, along with the vaults and some of the more wild quests, suddenly my imagination began to go wild. Even after finishing multiple videos on the series and releasing them, I still couldn't get the lore and world building out of my head. I was so fixated on just how fascinating the world of Fallout really was. And suddenly, just like that, I once again had an undying urge to give this series one more shot. For Fallout 3, now knowing so much of the lore, I found the introduction fascinating, really taking my time to roleplay living in a vault and what it would be like. The dreary demeanor of the outside world was now captivating as I knew some of the absolutely insane vaults that awaited me, and playing them for the first time myself was even more fun than any explanation could give. In Fallout 4, I learned to appreciate the crafting mechanics, which became extremely fun, and building and searching my way through the wasteland became a guilty pleasure for months. And Fallout New Vegas, despite how boring and lacking I still find it in so many ways, once I got into it on hardcore survival mode, it proved to me that it had immaculate writing and quest design that I was craving from this series, along with a lot of ways to build my character with stakes so high. And even going back and looking into especially Fallout 2 from Interplay, I grew to absolutely adore these games too. The hilarious moments and setups, the super deep RPG mechanics and tactics, and really dark and twisted events that left my mouth agape. But maybe most surprising of all, even Fallout 76 can be super fun, with the best environments in the series and multiple updates that make it fun to play and engage with, especially with friends. And really, overall, I have just done a complete 180 on the Fallout series. What started as something I would literally get depressed at playing, and a franchise I look down upon when compared to the Elder Scrolls, has in many ways surpassed it. Because while each game is much different from the last, they all have that unique quality of a harrowing world with wacky and fun themes. And when that's all centered around vaults meant for human torture and experimentation, the universe has practically endless ideas it could use to craft interesting stories and narratives that live on with us long after we finish playing. And it goes to show just how powerful good lore and world building can really be, especially when you take the time to understand it. And it's why after making videos like my Fallout Iceberg or my deep dives into every single vault, I get such strong urges to play again, because knowing the lore behind a game makes it even more fun to play with and interact with because you really understand what's going on. And it's also why I love making so many videos regarding lore and mysteries on this channel, because I hope to inspire you guys who watch them to play some of the games that I've fallen in love with too. And I think there's no better way to do that than have you fall in love with the world behind it all. And in that sense, Fallout is one of the best out there, and it took me so many years to realize it. If you guys have been watching my channel for a while now, you know that there are a select few games on this channel that are beloved by the gaming community at large that I simply don't like. Some of these include titles like Hollow Knight, which I absolutely ripped to shreds in my least popular video of all time that tons of people watching disagreed with vehemently, and I stand by everything I said there. But other games I hated on, after playing more and giving multiple playthroughs, I've come around to. And one of the best examples of this is Disco Elysium. Originally, when I first played the title, engaging with it for any more than 30 minutes would make me feel fatigued out of pure boredom. While I found the writing interesting at times, it was also so pretentious for pretentious sake. And the actual gameplay, if you could even call it that, was so mundane I would have rather just watched a movie about the same premise. And to top it all off, my initial impressions of all of the characters were that they were all very dry and unrelatable. Kim's monotone voice and presentation felt like an art student's obsession with depressed people and the meaninglessness of life come to fruition, and the actual unnamed character I played as at the start of the game was a sad, sorry drunk who had no redeeming qualities. And as if things couldn't get any worse too, the setting of the story, Revachol, was even more unbearable than the characters themselves, and included pretty much nothing I was interested in at all. Socialist and communist bloc countries and their political intrigue, while fascinating in their own right, are about the only section of the entire history of mankind I struggle to find any joy or interest in at all. But while that's a very personal opinion that many others might not share, what was undeniable was that Disco Elysium was a slow game, and one I most definitely was not enjoying at all. I even gave the title a couple of tries too, over 4 in fact, where in each subsequent run I got further and further but never fell in love. That was until the 5th and final time I finally tried this beloved indie icon, where it finally started to click for me. Because this time around I told myself I was going to give this strange game one more try, at the suggestion of so many of my viewers, and really take my time to listen to every bit of dialogue, engage with as many systems as I could, and explore places I hadn't been. And I'm so glad I did. Because you see, as funny as it sounds, I actually still don't like Disco Elysium all that much, but after finally completing it and doing all of the side missions, I get why so many do. There are a variety of awesome side quests and moments in this game, like where you find a ghost upstairs and it turns out to be a young innocent woman, or stumbling upon a truly paranormal event in a church that cascades into coming into contact with some utterly eerie people and entities. And throughout all of it, there are tons of hilarious and absurd things that you can say in dialogue that add a lot of much needed intrigue and comedy to the script. Early on, for example, there are a lot of funny moments like talking to a girl in the hotel room beside yours and immediately failing at flirting. But these moments become so much better once you get the context much later on of what really happened and who these people are. Because in Disco Elysium, you take on the role of a drunk cop who blacked out the night before so hard that he forgot who he was, on a journey to solve a murder that occurred in the very same place you're staying. And this means early on, things are so confusing. You have no connection to anyone, no idea of where anything is, and everything is at least partially a confusing mess on purpose. And it's that mess and trying to reverse it on my first 4 playthroughs that made this such a hard game to love. But once you push through that and start to get to the later half where the pieces all fall together and you uncover much more interesting places and quests, in my opinion, the game gets much better. And while I still find the setting mind-numbingly monotonous, moments like talking to a widow who you've fallen in love with by the beach about life and its meaning and what love even is makes up for it in spades. Without a doubt, Disco Elysium is a game with a lot of heart and situations that really make you think or laugh, just like one of its inspirations, Planescape Torment, did so many years ago. And it's only after I actually played through the whole game and all of the side content that I finally have a newfound appreciation for the experience. And I'm not going to sit here and act like I absolutely adore this game just for those of you watching, because I know I love seeing creators give love to games that I adore, but after finally completing Disco Elysium, I get why the game has the following it does. It's such a unique and almost surreal experience, and one that certainly is not for everyone, but if you can get past that initial block of bad gameplay, a boring world, and systems like a time mechanic which can be infuriating, you are left with something truly beautiful at the inside of it all. Full of characters that are much deeper than they originally seem, moments that will make your heart sing or your brain question, and RPG mechanics that revolutionize the genre and tie into your character build and choice and consequence perfectly. Certainly not a game I will be recommending non-stop in my videos like say Prey and Cyberpunk, as a lot of you know, but one that I have immense respect for now, and it's sad to see we may never get another game quite like it. I wish more than anything I could go back in time and play the Mass Effect trilogy for the first time all over again. There really isn't any other franchise out there quite like it, and with each new installment, things were reinvented while keeping the core of what makes the series great. And that's why during the original announcement of the second game when I was a kid, I was beyond excited. I watched every cinematic hype trailer, read every article, and consumed any little bit of media I could up until the release. And when I finally got my hands on Mass Effect 2, I was in awe. The huge cast of cool characters, the new pseudo-villain with the elusive man, and the now famous ending where you can potentially lose your entire crew that you've spent hours with up to this point. I hadn't played any games where the stakes were so high in my life, and considering it was from a series where I absolutely adored the first game, I was hooked. But strangely, over time, my opinion on Mass Effect 2 has taken a complete turn for the worst. You see, even going back today and playing Mass Effect 1 or 3, I feel a sense of magic that is hard to describe. It's like the games were made specifically for me. And while Mass Effect 2 has some of that, I think in retrospect, going back and playing years later many times, it's not only the worst Mass Effect in the original trilogy, but also is missing so much of what I love about the series. First of all, as cool as the characters were on my first playthrough, going back and spending time with them now feels a lot more boring. After playing games like Cyberpunk 2077, and even later BioWare titles like Dragon Age Inquisition, in comparison, the companions in Mass Effect 2 feel so hollow and one-dimensional. Sure, there are some pretty decent arcs like Liara becoming the Shadow Broker, Thane coming to the light, or Jack learning to love again, but the writing on offer here, while fine, doesn't hold a candle to more modern and mature takes on relationships in games I play now. But that's just one personal opinion. I still definitely get why people adore these characters so much, and there are some standouts here for me too, like Morden, Tally, or Legion, who are really awesome. But even with these characters, their greatest moments are in the first and third game, not the second. My true biggest gripe with the second installment in the trilogy though, is it lost a lot of my favorite aspects, especially from the first game, like world building. You see, in the first Mass Effect, at one point at the start of the game, you land on the Citadel for the first time and are essentially stuck there for hours while you talk to aliens and get to know the universe. And while for many people this might sound and was boring, it's exactly what made this series so special for me in the first place. The original game was all about world building, exploring the galaxy, and learning about brand new worlds and species we'd never seen before. In contrast, the second game feels like a bunch of character stories set in a generic universe that culminate in a climactic ending. And to top it off, none of these characters have any real agency. Shepard can be as mean or nice to them as possible, and they still follow him into battle, as opposed to something like, say, Dragon Age Origins, where companions will turn against you and try to kill you if you wrong them. But the even bigger thing is, I don't play Mass Effect for the characters. I know a lot of people do, but for me, far and away what makes this series great is the world building and writing. Learning about the Reapers, Sovereign, the Rachni, the Thorian, or the Protheans is just so much more interesting than learning about why some random goth girl with tattoos is angry. Because honestly, I've played a lot of games with characters that have mommy and daddy issues that they have to work out with the help of the player character, and many do it better than Mass Effect, sorry to say. I've played plenty of games with bromances and friendships that really stand out, and Mass Effect, as great as it is, isn't something truly special with people even like Garrus and Rex. But what was and is truly special about Mass Effect is the world and stories it tells. I mean, truly, discovering things like the Rachni for the first time in a top secret research facility on Noveria is so much more interesting than having a love interest with an NPC that will pretty much like you no matter what you do. And on top of that, the second Mass Effect barely moves the plot forward. If you really take a step back and think about what actually changed with the story of Mass Effect 2, it's essentially just a filler episode of a TV show with a cool ending, where sure, you get to meet a lot of characters that you build connections with for Mass Effect 3, but the actual narrative and what happens here is so disjointed and pointless. You could literally just play Mass Effect 1 and 3 and the main plot would essentially stay exactly the same. The only issue is you would have less background on some of the characters and you wouldn't know who the Elusive Man is at first. Whereas in the first game you get great build-ups and reveals like meeting Sovereign and discovering he's a Reaper for the first time. In Mass Effect 2, Cerberus is just everywhere and has all the resources they need with no justification or build-up outside of one small mission in Mass Effect 1. And even looking at something I enjoy about the second game, like the ending, I actually even like the ending of, say, the first game even more. It was more spectacular, more movie-like, the stakes felt higher, and the main bad guy we were going up against felt so much more imposing, along with the environment, in my opinion, being so much more fascinating and awe-inspiring. Or what about even the combat, another stumbling block for the second installment? Whereas in the first game the combat was extremely janky, it allowed for hilarious builds like being a biotic who could literally throw bosses off the map with force pushes that would send them 100 feet in the sky. In contrast, the third game felt super refined and fun, with tactical third-person combat that was balanced and actually fun to play, even for modern shooter standards. But the second game in comparison was a weird middle ground between the two that was janky and refined at the same time, with a lack of true identity that BioWare finally found in Mass Effect 3 and Andromeda. Or essentially, in retrospect, I really and truly believe that Mass Effect 2 is far and away the worst game of the original trilogy, and I don't even think it's close. And for any of you that still disagree with me and do say the second game is the best, after all, it's by far the most loved if you read about it online, I have a test for you. Play Cyberpunk 2077 and do all the character missions there. and then go back and play the entire Mass Effect trilogy, and tell me that you're still in love with the second game and that the characters are what make this series great. Because in my opinion, they were always cool and fun, but never absolutely amazing. And because the second game focused so much on them rather than the world building, lore, story, and universe, what actually made Mass Effect special, the second game suffered greatly. So much so that nowadays when I replay the trilogy, I struggle getting through it and want to just skip it. Because the true beauty of Mass Effect isn't the characters. They are an important aspect and do make the games better. But the core of this series was always the huge set pieces and unbelievable reveals that made you sit back in awe and think about a universe that doesn't exist, but one you can get utterly lost in.